Welcome to our weekly tea sit, where we gather together virtually and share some tea, have a small discussion about tea and life. As usual, we'll start with some silence. I hope you're somewhere safe and happy and comfortable, and that you can drink some tea together with me, enjoy some time together in this virtual way, at least connected in this present moment. So let's have 3 bowls. So hopefully your 3 bowls were as lovely as mine. First, we start with a small announcement. For those of you who don't know, we have this new online course coming up, July 18th to the 24th. But actually it will be up for 1 month. So the live portion will happen during the 18th to the 24th, but you don't have to attend the live sessions because it will be up for 1 month. So you have a month to watch and rewatch the videos. I'm very excited about this. If you were looking to begin a tea practice or deepen your tea practice, it should be fun. You should think about enjoying the course and joining together with us, people all over the world, to drink some tea and talk about tea, talk about Jia Dao. So you can find out, we'll put a link below. It's teahutcourses.com. You can go there to sign up and learn more about the course. I think we'll continue just having small discussions of Zen slogans. First of all, I like slogans because they are condensed, packed up, dense, pithy proverbs, sayings, teachings. And they're not sequential, so it means that each time we do this broadcast, it can stand alone. It doesn't need to, you don't need to have watched the previous ones. Also, there's always much more to unpack from them than I have time to cover in these few minutes. Some of these slogans I've been working with for years and still don't understand. So I like the idea that, first of all, that my commentary is just our commentary. There are other commentaries out there, and that more importantly, you can develop your own contemplation, and hopefully also beyond contemplation, apply these proverbs in your own life. Because as I keep repeating over and over again, I don't view teachings, my teachings that I give or teachings that I receive, I don't view teachings as philosophical stances or arguments. I'm not here to tell you the way that things are, or worse, to tell you what you should or should not do, but rather teachings to me are invitations to explore. So they are questions to ask and ponder and contemplate and hopefully apply as well, on an experiential level, not just intellectually. So I feel like these proverbs fulfill all the requirements of a little tea gathering, weekly live broadcast format. So this week, another of my favorites, a very deep one. There's one, I'm also, all these slogans, I'm just loosely translating them. You can find other translations maybe that are better than mine. But there's an old Zen slogan that I think is very applicable to many of us and to a lot of things going on in the world. And it's one of my favorite and the ones that I've worked with the hardest. It's one of the ones that also really gets you scratching your head and you have to think deeply, which is don't seek enlightenment, rather drop all opinions. Don't seek enlightenment, drop all opinions would be a more concise translation. This one is very powerful. In the first place, it's saying to us that enlightenment is not an opinion. Enlightenment is not an idea. It is a deep connection with the consciousness out of which ideas come. It is not an opinion. It is the awareness of the one who makes opinions. The ideas and opinions that we have are like clouds, and consciousness is like the sky. And consciousness actually is vast, and we are bigger than we sell ourselves short. We are bigger than we think we are on most ordinary days, in the ordinary mind. And so what happens when you courageously face not knowing? In Sanskrit, of course, the word for wisdom is prajna. Para means before, and nya is knowledge. In Zen, we translate this as beginner's mind, the I don't know mind. What happens when, instead of frantically trying to form an opinion, frantically trying to understand what's going on and have an opinion about it, you just say, I don't know. When you say, I don't know, it actually makes it much easier to get to know the knower, which is in the language of Zen, or our Buddha nature. So the issue with the opinions ultimately is that they are very noisy. That's why the internet is a very noisy place, because it's a very opinionated place. And so, because in person people are often more polite than they are from a distance on the internet, and when you enter an opinionated space, it's very noisy. And that includes our own heads. And when you're identifying with those opinions, right, we make identities out of our opinions, our preferences, right? So as opposed to the fact that I abstain mostly 99.9%. In fact, there's only 2 instances in the last 35 years that I have eaten meat, and they were both very good reasons. So I abstain from eating meat. That's a dietary preference. But that could also become an identity. You could say, I am a vegetarian. We can turn anything into an identity. Our political views, we can say, I'm Zen. My teacher used to say there's nothing more un-Zen than saying that you're Zen. So you can identify with not identifying, the anti-social social club, as they say. You can make an identity out of these opinions. We identify with the opinions. But when you identify with the opinions, you are identifying with the surface. You're not connecting to the water, to the ocean. You're identifying with the wave. And therefore missing out and defining yourself as smaller than what you really are. And it's more difficult to know the knower when you are influenced strongly by that noise. So don't seek enlightenment, just drop all opinions, is being courageous and resting in a mind of I don't know, not knowing, being okay and comfortable with not knowing will, in a way you could say, break up the clouds and allow and make the consciousness that creates those clouds, the sky, more available, accessible, and insights surrounding that will start to arise in your life. The other thing is that when we cling to these opinions, we polarize ourselves, and we can lose our empathy and our ability to listen and to hear other points of view. And those points of view might be important. Sometimes just listening is important. It doesn't even matter if the person's view is a wrong view. You won't be able to help them if you're just in a confrontational state, identified with the opposite opinion. Whereas if you listen, then there's a chance that they can even calm down and maybe get to a space where their view could be corrected. But if you look, now is a very politically charged time. And like all politically charged times, it's like if you ever happen to be in an most likely embarrassing situation where you were there when a couple was having a full fight, an outright fight with each other. And of course you feel like you want to leave your third wheel, but what you'll notice immediately is that they are arguing past each other. They're not really communicating. This one's not really hearing what this one's saying, and this one's not hearing what this one's saying. They're talking about different things or towards different things. And that's because it's hard to listen when you are strongly identified with the way things are, or your opinion has become frozen and rigid and difficult to know the knower. So this slogan is very deep and powerful. It goes, of course, to many other levels than what I've spoken about. And you can use it also to start paying attention to your own opinions, and deeper beneath that to the desire to have an opinion, the fear of the unknown, the inability to say I don't know, maybe out of pride. You always want to appear like I have something to contribute to the conversation or to the idea, what's being stated. So as opposed to saying I don't know. When actually what I don't know is infinitely more vast than what I do. The little bit that I know is surrounded by an infinity of don't know. And how I relate to that don't know is important. So you can confront that desire, that itch to always have some opinion. And the frustrated, kind of frantic search to figure out what's going on and have an opinion about it. And then behind that, even, the consciousness out of which ideas come, out of which opinions are formed. And that is bigger than the boundaries even of ourselves. And there's a space in which we all connect to all things. Right? In the Western world was sold this idea that we are unique because we are special because we are different. But actually we're much more special because we're part of all things. Because these atoms were once in a star. Because the water in my body was in a cloud 2 weeks ago. Because the energy in me was photosynthesized by plants, and then I consumed them, and then it's star energy is in me again. Because it's billions of woven factors and causes and conditions that have all unraveled throughout the billions of years of this earth to create me, the miracle that is this body and you and this space and all of us. So we are connected, we are big, and that actually is much more special than the things that make me unique. It's not the things that make me unique are not important or that they're not real. They are. But they aren't as cool as the part of me that is connected to the universe. So my opinions are just part of an identity story. And ultimately they're not real. It doesn't, not even if every human on earth agrees that Tree of Life is the best movie ever made, which it is. Even if everyone agrees with that opinion, the physical constitution of the universe will not have changed. Not a single atom will have moved. Not a single electron will have moved. It is meaningless. That opinion is a more facetious example, but that's only because I don't want to get into any charged examples. But we all have our personal opinions, and they weigh heavily on our consciousness. They're noisy. They weigh heavily on us. And the desire to have an opinion and to figure that what our opinion is also weighs heavily. And so when we let go of that, at least in Zazen, at least in meditation, we can know the knower. We can realize that enlightenment is not an idea, it's not an opinion, it's an identification with the space and the clouds that are in the space, and the space that's in the clouds and the clouds that are in the space, as opposed to just identifying with just the clouds. So I encourage you to contemplate this slogan, maybe seek out other translations, think about what it means to you, and hopefully also apply it in your life if you can. See what happens.
Question from the app. Frederick Wallen is asking, any tips on how to work with one's pride, to master it, make it fade and not be controlled by it during our lives?
So somebody asking how to deal with pride. That's interesting because we're just talking about it in relation to the need to have an opinion, always have an opinion. I think with all the kleshas are like defects of character, the toxins or whatever. Somebody last week asked, how do I separate from that which I'm not? And I've discussed this before. I think it's a waste of energy to fight against kleshas, to fight against our defects of character. Because the moment we brand the part of ourselves as enemy, the kleshas like that, I'm anthropomorphizing them just for discussion. They like that, and if we then do them the favor of going blow for blow, we get all tangled up. So the pushing is less relevant than the ardent perseverance towards the light. So don't worry about the shadows. When the light comes on, they go away. It's just pursue the positive ardently, earnestly. Create the conditions for healthy practice and maintain those conditions. Create the conditions for the mind of compassion and wisdom, and those things will come. They will arise slowly, but focus on the conditions. Don't worry about too much about pushing, right? In terms of pride in particular, this slogan that I gave you today is also very applicable. Facing and being more comfortable with not knowing. You can do that even as a contemplative exercise. You could even do it as a practical exercise in terms of next time people are expressing their opinions. Perhaps you go out to a movie with some friends and afterwards they're all expressing their opinions. Don't say anything and just observe the itch to insert your opinion. You can also then pay attention to how little human beings actually care about other people's opinions. If you listen to them inserting their opinions, it's often as if the others people's opinions don't matter at all. You can, as I said, the internet is a very opinionated place, so you can see this in like forums. You go to a forum to learn about something, and you see this dude, this dude, he's the 27th whatever poster, and you can tell that he didn't read the other 26. Like, he's not really interested in listening, he's interested in expressing. And communication is actually more listening. It of course requires expression as well, but I'd say It's really good communication. It's more about listening than it is about articulation. And if you've got two people that are articulating strongly but not listening, there's no communication. Whereas if you've got people who are listening very strongly but they're not great at articulating, you can still have great communication. So you can start to observe that itch and start to rest a little bit in more comfort with I don't know. Right? Maybe that is connected to like masculine stuff as well. You know, I had some of that growing up, that kind of machismo, or like need to puff my chest, and that saying I don't know would be somehow weakness or something. Maybe that for you also is an issue, maybe not. But there's also just the discomfort of the unknown, but so much is unknown. And there is a great power in being in the I don't know mind. And ultimately, tea also can help us to cultivate humility by serving others. Finally, I would suggest taking moral inventory. My teacher used to say, the more zazen you do, the more you realize you're an asshole. Which is a strong way of saying that, you know, we are all filled with these kleshas. This is not a flogging of yourself. It's not what this is about. He's making a joke. Was being facetious, but there's great truth in it too. We have endless blind passions, and you begin to introspect. You realize that you have a lot of these kleshas. So you're not very cool. I'm certainly not very cool. And the more you realize that, it creates a humbleness and allows more wisdom and things to come in, creates receptivity. Pride and thinking you know the answers, it just prevents energy from coming in. It creates borders, and those borders prevent any new learning from coming in. Right? Somebody who's very strongly opinionated, you give them a book and they read it and they say, I agreed with page 3, 17 and 34. I disagree with all the rest. So they were just like scanning the book basically for information that they already knew and agree with. And anything that didn't conform with that was rejected. So they are really stuck in that, and nothing can get in, right? It's like a castle. The wall prevents the enemies from coming in. But then to defeat the castle, you siege it. Because then that same wall that is the armor will become a weapon. Because not only does the wall prevent enemies from coming in, it also prevents good things from coming in. So people can't get any more water or food. And so eventually they will starve and they will have to surrender. So that same armor that you think is defending you as some kind of coping mechanism is also preventing healing energy from coming in. It's preventing love and relationship from coming in. It's preventing new teachings and new ways of thinking and new understandings and new ways of looking at the world from coming in, which is always important. And that comes in when we hear the other person. If we're too opinionated and frozen, we can't get it in. And that includes not just big ideas, also even like events. Even when we are there and we think, I know what happened, I was there. Actually, you just saw one angle. There's actually much more going on, always. It's always worth maintaining a connection to the I don't know mind. That's wisdom. That's prajna. To be receptive, always. We all have more room to grow. The only masters are those who have passed away. Until then, we're all students. We all have to bow. And we have to let it in.
In the last live broadcast, Julia asked a question that we didn't get to. She's asking if our reaction towards the issue is the issue, and there are two people trying to work through a situation with each seeing it in their own way. How can they move forward from that point?
That's a good question. This is from the last broadcast, but it's related to what we're talking about now too. So if our orientation towards the issue is the issue, I talked about that last time, our orientation towards the issue is the only issue, and two people are trying to work something out, that seems like, then if they're both focused on just how they're orienting to the issue, they're not going to be able to communicate well. But like what I've just been speaking about, learning to listen and not be stuck in thinking you know what happened, or even the desire to think you know what happened, right? That's the layers of this. Dropping the opinion and then dropping the desire to have an opinion and resting in I don't know, being open to not knowing. I think in terms of, I suspect the question has to do with couples. And one of the greatest skills that can be utilized, especially between couples, but really in any relationship where there's conflict or disharmony or different opinions, is what's called perception checking, which is to express back to the person what you're hearing, to make sure that that's what they actually intend. And just in doing this exercise, like in doing most kind of perception checking with the world, any kind of perception checking with the world, this goes back to the earlier question about pride. When you start doing any kind of check, you as soon as you do it with a little bit of an open mind, you begin to realize how little your maps actually conform to reality. Even when you were there, I was there, I witnessed it, I'm so sure that's what happened. And then actually the more you unpack what happened, the more you realize you're not really that sure. Right? The court of opinion almost always hangs the wrong man, or for the wrong reasons, or doesn't understand the context, or is lost in just an oversimplification of things or something. It's always skewed. So the more you realize, wow, I was skewed. Wow, that was so skewed. Wow, skewed. The more you approach things with an open mind, the more you realize you don't know. The more scientific exploration you conduct, the more you realize how vast and amazing things are, and how awesome this world is, and how little we know about it, and how much more there is to learn. And you shouldn't be filled with pride, but rather with receptivity and a desire to explore more, to ask more questions. And so in the same way, between a couple or between two people, when you perception check, one of the byproducts of doing so is that you will begin to diagnose your own problem of being wrong and be more comfortable in not knowing. So what this looks like, in other words, is, right, so I say to Janos here, right, I check back with him that what I'm hearing is actually what he's saying. So I say, okay, let me get this straight. You can do this in any language you like, but the point is that I reflect back, this is what I'm hearing from you. And I want to make sure that what I'm hearing is what you mean. What I'm hearing is X, Y, Z. And what you'll find is very often, Janos will then say, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. And you'll realize, whoa, but that is so very much what I heard. And then you'll realize, wow, what I heard was warped through filters. And then you can say, okay, if that's not what you mean, then can you explain it to me in a different way? And that person then explains it to you in a different way, and then you could check again. Okay, so now this is what I'm hearing. And then you see what that results in is actually two human beings communicating to each other as opposed to communicating to what they think they're hearing. This is what I was talking about earlier when people are opinionated and they're talking past each other. It's like if you have person A and person B, and person A speaks, and what person B hears is not what person A meant, then person B's reaction is to what they think they heard. So they're reacting to this projection C. And if this person is doing that and reacting to their projection D, they're both arguing against this. They're not even talking to each other because they're not even receiving what the other actually means. So this is powerful exercise. And if you put it into practice, you'll see. And this isn't just an exercise that couples can do or people that are discussing with each other, but actually as you unpack anything, right? You might think that 30 years of highly geekified, totally geeked out, in-depth exploration of tea would result in some kind of feeling of like expertise. And maybe for some people it might, but I don't feel that way at all. I'm constantly reading new things that are like, wow, I didn't know anything about that type of tea. And what I knew, I was wrong. And like constantly learning new things. And even many of the issues of Global Tea Hut, because they're translated from people that know a lot more about a particular aspect of tea or tea culture than I do, I'm also reading them along with you guys. And like this month's issue on Ginbins, I learned so much. I read the articles, most of them twice. I was just like, wow, I never knew. Oh, I was completely wrong about that, you know. And so I just am left with, first of all, I don't know. And second of all, a desire to explore and to live in wonder and learn more. So when you do that kind of checking and you realize that you're often wrong, it also humbles you, makes you want to get better at listening.
Another question on the app from Frederick Wallen. Could you give any advice on practicing different types of meditation at the same time? Could I, for example, practice breath meditation in the morning and mantra meditation in the evening, or would I be better off sticking to one kind?
So this is about practicing different kinds of meditations at the same time. There's arguments we had on both sides. Really, ultimately, we have to all, in this age of communication and openness and all these computers and microphones and everything available, we have to get really good at the science of which plants thrive in a garden. It's not like in the olden days, like all the plants that were growing up were all local to that place and they all were of that ecology. And so over millions of years, nature had slowly, they had all found their niche and found their balance, right? So they all worked in a way that, you know, either surrenders one to the other or is flat out cooperative. But the ecology is balanced and it has achieved that balance over a long, long period of time. But then when you introduce something foreign, like you introduce a foreign bee, for example, then there's a bee now killing a lot of bees in America because it's a wasp that is foreign, right? So similarly, many scientists believe that most Native Americans were actually killed by old world diseases that they had no immunity to. Here in Taiwan, there's a plant the government will give you money to rip it out. This is foreign and this is an island, and this plant can kill a lot of other plants that are native. So the point is that now we have access, the analogy is basically, you know, now we have access to so many techniques and teachings and self-helps and this is and that's, and we can do Shiva Shakti dancing or Sufi twirling, or we can do tea ceremony. We have access to teachers of all different types of practices and lineages. And so it's also now our responsibility. One of the skills that we have to learn in this day and age isn't just like how to get information, but how to block information. In other words, you have to develop an ability to know these two plants can live in the same garden and neither harm nor help each other. These two plants can live in the same garden and they will harm each other. And these two plants can live in the same garden and they will help each other, like beans and corn and squash, right? Ideally, we want practices that are of that latter, that all feed each other. But at least we want the kind that they don't help or harm. But ideally, we want them to thrive together. And so you have to develop that skill. That's just a necessary skill in this day and age. It's not, you can't get a list of like, okay, breath can go with yoga and with, no, that's not helpful anyway. That kind of formula of these things go with these things go with these, it's not, you have to develop the skill in your own garden to be able to find the right plants that will help each other or at least not harm each other. That's an important skill for developing in this day and age.
Another question from Frederick Wallen on the app. How do you determine if a red tea is good for brewing Gongfu or not? What makes a red tea a Gongfu red tea?
We have a whole, this is what makes a Gongfu red tea. Ultimately, any red tea could be brewed Gongfu. There are Gongfu red teas are more ideal for brewing Gongfu. We have a whole issue on Gongfu red tea. I would suggest go reading that for much more information. But Gongfu red tea kind of evolved. Even the stories and legends of how it evolved highlight the fact that it was semi-accidental. The stories are that it evolved in Wuyi or nearby, and though there are other mountains that claim provenance, but the story is that the emperor's soldiers were going to ambush a rebellion, and they showed up in the village, and the villagers were withering their tea, and the soldiers said, "Hey, take care of us. We're passing through to go ambush that." And the villagers had to take care of the soldiers, and so they couldn't finish their tea, and the tea withered overnight, and thus came the first red tea. In fact, there are other versions of the story where the soldiers actually made beds out of the tea leaves and rolled around on them, and that further oxidized them. And so, really, red tea is the last station on the oolong line. It's just more, people often say fully oxidized. There's no such thing as complete oxidation, but very, very extremely oxidized oolong. Now, that legend, of course, just a legend, and how that tea first evolved, or why, is not really, we don't really know historically, but it is also influenced by the fact that Westerners started trying to make their own tea. So first the Dutch in Indonesia, and then the British in Assam started to, and the British were actually following they were literally following the guides of the Dutch, and so these guys didn't really know what they were doing, and so potentially maybe also accidentally over-oxidized the tea. And then that people liked that. There's also stories of like tea oxidizing more heavily as it traveled in ships to the West, and for whatever reason, Western people, for all of these combined things, Western people developed a taste for red tea, and the Chinese then started making it. Not only did the Westerners commission it, but the Chinese then started making it, and they started, making it almost exclusively for these. The red tea was made exclusively for export. And so, things for export, especially from China, especially traditional China, where they would usually use the lower quality, later season, like summer leaves, things, unwanted kind of leaves were what was often used to make red tea. Especially it's going to be oxidized so heavily. Like in oolong, the liquor traditionally, nowadays, a lot of liquor, it's interesting, has actually become more red. But in the old texts, the oolong liquor should be golden, and if it was red, that was considered a mistake. So the oxidation had gone too far is a mistake. Then some tea makers started to want to put their energy into making higher quality red tea. There's a suggestion perhaps that this began in Ximen, where we visited on our Global Tea Hut trip. That's also, you can read about it, and if you read the Gongfu issue. So rather than using later flush teas, they started using first flush, more expensive teas. Right? The red tea is also cheaper. This remains true today. It's cheaper. So if you use the highest quality raw material to make and skill to make the red tea, you have to sell it for as much or more as the usually it's green tea. So Gongfu red teas are teas that are using, first of all, the highest quality raw materials, and then using much more refined processing, as opposed to just this is the cheap kind of after the fact, but really putting an effort into making really high quality tea. And because of that, it responds to Gongfu brewing. Remember, Gongfu, this term, first didn't apply to a tea brewing method. It applied to a tea making method. Gongfu tea originally was a term that referred to oolong tea, in particular cliff tea, because it required so much skill to produce. And so when people said Gongfu tea, they were talking about the production, the skill, the mastery that it took to produce the tea. And then, of course, a brewing method evolved to bring the best out of that type of tea. If you have an heirloom tomato that comes from generations of a very particular tomato tree, and it's also the best tomato of that garden of that year, and you did something nice, so your friend gives you that tomato as a gift, you're going to want to prepare it with skill. You're not just going to want to eat it or throw it in a salad. Even if you put it in a salad, you're going to want to make it a special salad. So you're going to want to cook it with some skill, and if you don't have the skill to cook it properly, you're going to want to call a friend who's a chef or something and come over and help you. I have this really special tomato. So the higher the quality the leaf, the greater the desire to prepare it in a way that can bring out such fine qualities. And thus evolved the Gongfu brewing method. The Gongfu brewing method evolved for other reasons too, but that's a big factor, is the creation of such refined tea, oolong tea. And so Gongfu red tea is just a higher grade of leaf processed with a lot more skill. And the result is a tea that responds very well to Gongfu brewing. If you want a tea example you want to try, we have a beautiful Gongfu red tea on the website right now called Red Sun Rising. It's also a Ximen.
Okay, another tea question. Owen is asking, are there any certain teas that are more appropriate to drink in the summer?
Are there teas that are more appropriate to drink in the summer? Yes, teas are very seasonal, and it's very helpful to think in those terms. It's hard to give kind of general principles, though, to say like, oh, this whole genre is good for summer, this whole genre is good for winter, because first of all, it depends on where you live and what the seasons are like. The seasons here in Taiwan are very different than where you are. We don't have 4 seasons. Second of all, within each genre of tea, there's a whole hundreds, if not thousands, of types, and so it's very challenging to make this kind of list, but it's something that you have to develop a skill and a feel for. But in general, take this with a grain of salt. In general, in the summer, we want to drink teas that are more yin and more cooling. So that means yang shang pu'er, green tea, white tea. Especially these types of teas are really good. Liu Bao, especially aged Liu Bao, is very good too, because in the summer here in Taiwan it's also damp, and Liu Bao expels dampness. But that's the thing. That's where I said back to where you are. Maybe where you are, your summer is very dry. Where I was born and grew up, it's very hot but very dry in the summer, so maybe Liu Bao would not be ideal. But here in Taiwan, it is extremely ideal because here is hot and wet. So Liu Bao is very good to expel dampness. But in general, yang shang pu'er and green tea and lightly roasted oolong, baozhong, a lot of these types of teas are ideal for this season.
So going back to what we talked earlier, somebody's asking, how does trust fit into, in terms of discussing two sides of a situation, how to trust while in disagreement?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
When two people are arguing, how does trust fit into this if they see things differently?
How does trust... well, if you practice a lot what I was speaking about earlier, and you aren't so heavily invested or identified with opinion, and you're willing to rest in a state of don't know, and don't take my word for that, but again, teachings are invitations to explore. See what happens when you explore a mind of don't knowness, when you live in that way. If you're not so invested, then one of the things that happens is you can listen. And you can listen to the other person and to their perspective and learn from it. And at least empathize. And certainly, humans are capable of wrong view. Wrong not in a moral sense, not in a sense of evil, but wrong in a sense of ignorant and discordant with reality and truth and their own higher self and higher purpose. But sometimes the best way to help a person align with their higher self and higher purpose and truth, and therefore truth, is just to listen to them as opposed to correcting them. When you try to correct them, especially if you do so aggressively, they just get more entrenched and more defensive in their position. Right? That which, as Ursula Le Guin said, that which we resist persists. So the more that you push hard, the more that person walls up. And so sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen. And just by having a space where they feel comfortable and safe, and they can trust you, and they can express how they feel, that is cathartic. And maybe that will then maybe show to themselves that their view is inappropriate or discordant with their highest self and purpose. And sometimes you have to just wait and be patient, and there'll be the right time and the right situation to help them to correct their view. But it's very rare that you can dominate or win the argument or debate and convince the other human. You've been defeated by my superior argumentative chess skills, and now you shall rest in your ignominious defeat and realize how you were wrong. It almost never happens that way, right? The more that you push, the more they, even though it's irrational, even though it's obvious they're wrong to everybody, the more they cling to their wrong view. So it's not often helpful to argue someone down. And even if you defeat them in this way, you're still then left with what you do now with each other. right? So you've won, but you've broken the relationship as a result of the way that you won. And then there's dysfunction all over again in a different form. So learning to listen and create trusting space is important in all relationships. And it's important to let people have ideas and let them express them, even if they're wrong. This is the kind of modern democratic milieu, is this idea that, like, you don't, even if it's disagreeable and wrong, that person should have the freedom of speech to say basically how they feel, and we can listen, and that's a wrong view, and maybe we all go a different direction. And that listening can be challenging when the person is expressing a view that is so obviously ignorant and wrong and not good for them, or in alignment, discordant with truth and reality and their own higher purpose. Their view is in and we can stand up even to that, but maybe not create a space between us where only certain viewpoints can be expressed. That we work like that with our relationships as well. So as I said, more of communication is just about listening and realizing that you're not very good at listening, so you can perception check. Is this what you mean? This is what I'm hearing. I want to make sure that this is what you're actually saying.
Vegan Nomad says, the last issue of the magazine about silver kettles was very interesting. Has copper ever been used in Chinese tea culture, and what's your opinion about its qualities that it lends to water and tea?
So it's about copper kettles. As far as I understand it, copper is much better just for cold water. So it's like in India, they use copper cups, or if you have a copper water bottle, it has a very positive effect on the cold water. But for hot water, there's some kind of toxin is released that has to do with the oxidation of copper. I don't mean toxin in terms of like you boiled water in copper and then you drank it one time and died. But slowly there is a toxicity that results, which is why copper is very good at obviously conducting heat and electricity, but heat and so it like when you look at chef's pans that are they are copper on the outside, because the copper helps distribute the heat, because they want the pan to be even heat everywhere, but the inside will be lined with steel or tin, so the part that actually touches the liquid is not copper. So I'm not sure about all the science, but there's a reason for not using copper in terms of the heating water for tea. There's a toxicity that results from the oxidation, which only comes off somehow with the presence of heat. So this is good for cold water, but not so great for a kettle, unless it's lined with something. Usually when they make them, we have people figure this out early on even, so usually they are lined with something on the inside. Okay, that's it. Stay happy and peaceful, and communicate better, listen more, rest in I don't know mine. See how many I don't know minds you can cultivate this week. Think about this slogan: explore, agree, disagree, it's okay, but explore and contemplate and grow, and keep drinking lots of tea, spreading peace and love. It's needed so much in the world right now. It's needed for us to stay open-hearted, stay positive. Have a wonderful week.